There's a kind of loneliness that money cannot fix. Not the loneliness of an empty apartment, or a quiet Friday night, or a phone that doesn't ring. No, this is a different kind. This is the loneliness of a man standing in a room full of people who all want something from him, and not one of them, not a single soul, sees him, really sees him. They see the suit. They see the Forbes cover. They see the $4.7 billion valuation, and the private jet, and the corner office on the 52nd floor. But the man inside all that, the man who still flinches when someone raises their voice, the man who still eats cereal for dinner when no one is watching, that man has been invisible for a very long time. His name is Cole Harrington. And tonight, at 11:47 p.m., in an empty hotel bar in downtown Chicago, Cole Harrington is about to meet the only person in 10 years who will look him dead in the eye and tell him the truth. He doesn't know that yet. Right now, he just thinks he's alone. Before we go any further, if this story already has you feeling something, do this one thing. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with someone who loves a good story. And drop a comment below telling me what you think is about to happen. Because I promise you, you are not ready for where this goes. Now, let's get back to Cole. Cole Harrington did not become a billionaire by being soft. He grew up in Dayton, Ohio, in a 2-bedroom house where the heat got cut off every January, and his mother worked double shifts at a diner called Patty's Place on the corner of 5th and Main. He remembers sitting by the kitchen window as a boy, watching her walk to the bus stop in the dark, her breath making little clouds in the cold air, her shoulders pulled up to her ears against the wind. He remembers thinking, I'm going to fix this. I don't know how, but I'm going to fix this. By the time Cole was 19, he had taught himself to code on a second-hand laptop he bought for $40 at a garage sale. By 22, he had built his first app, a simple scheduling tool for small businesses, and sold it for $180,000 to a company in Cincinnati. He cried in his car for 20 minutes after the wire transfer hit. Then he called his mother. Then he drove to Patty's Place and told her she could stop. She didn't stop, of course. His mother, Margaret Harrington, was not built for stopping, but she cut back to mornings only, and that was enough. By 30, Cole had founded Harrington Systems, a data infrastructure company that quietly became the backbone of half the healthcare networks in the United States. Not flashy, not the kind of thing that got you on the cover of Wired with a cool jacket and a skateboard, but essential, the kind of essential that made hospitals run, that kept patient records from disappearing, that made sure a doctor in rural Montana could pull up your medical history in 12 seconds instead of 12 hours. By 38, Cole Harrington was worth $4.7 billion, and he had no idea how to give a speech. This was the secret he guarded more carefully than any financial filing, more carefully than any boardroom strategy. Cole Harrington, the man who had testified before Congress, who had keynoted 3 consecutive industry conferences, who had been interviewed by every major publication in America, Cole Harrington was terrified of public speaking. Not nervous, not mildly uncomfortable. Terrified, the kind of terrified that starts in your stomach the night before and climbs up into your chest and sits there like a stone until the moment you step off the stage. He had learned to hide it. A good tailor helped. A teleprompter helped more. A PR team that pre-approved every question helped most of all. But this TEDx talk was different. TEDx didn't do teleprompters. TEDx didn't do pre-approved questions. TEDx did 18 minutes. No notes. Just you and the audience and whatever truth you were brave enough to say out loud. Cole had agreed to do it 6 months ago at a charity dinner in New York after his 3rd glass of wine, because the organizer had looked at him with this expression that said, "You of all people have a story worth telling." And something in Cole had believed her in that moment. Something in Cole had wanted to be that person, the person with a story worth telling. Now it was 3 weeks before the talk, and he still didn't have a speech. He had 12 drafts. His communications director, a relentlessly efficient woman named Patricia, had gone through all 12 and declared each one a masterpiece. His PR consultant had called Draft 7 genuinely moving. His chief of staff had forwarded Draft 11 to 3 different people with the subject line. Boss knocked it out of the park. Cole had read all 12 drafts back to himself in the mirror that morning and felt nothing. They sounded like press releases. They sounded like the corporate version of a human being. They sounded like everything except the truth. So at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, while his team slept in their respective rooms on the 14th floor of the Langham Hotel in downtown Chicago, Cole Harrington put on jeans and a plain gray T-shirt, took his laptop and a legal pad and a pen, rode the elevator down a lobby bar, and decided to try one more time. The bar was called the Meridian. It was a kind of bar that existed in good hotels. Dark wood paneling, amber lighting, leather stools, a back wall lined with bottles that caught the light. During the day, it was full of business travelers in button-down shirts, all of them staring at laptops, all of them on calls. At midnight, it was empty. Almost. There was one person behind the bar. Cole noticed her the way you notice something that doesn't quite fit the frame. She was young, mid-20s. He guessed. She had dark hair pulled back into a ponytail, and she was wiping down the bar counter with the focused, efficient energy of someone who had been on her feet for 8 hours and was determined to finish the job correctly anyway. She didn't look up when he walked in. She was wearing a hotel uniform, black vest, white shirt, but there was something about the way she wore it that suggested she had not spent a single second thinking about how she looked in it. She was not performing anything. She was just working. Cole sat down at the far end of the bar. He opened his laptop. He spread his legal pad out next to it. He uncapped his pen. He stared at the screen. Draft 13, he thought. Here we go. The bartender appeared in front of him without making a sound. She set a glass of water on a coaster and looked at him with an expression that was polite but not warm. The expression of someone who has served 1,000 hotel guests and learned to calibrate exactly how much energy each one deserves at this hour of the night. He ordered a whiskey. Neat. She nodded and turned away. He stared at his screen. The cursor blinked. He started typing. What does it mean to build something from nothing? He typed. Then he stopped. Patricia had told him to open with a question. Audiences respond to questions. She had said, it creates immediate engagement. Cole read the sentence back. It sounded like the opening of a LinkedIn post. He deleted it. He tried again. When I was 9 years old, my mother walked to the bus stop in the dark. Better. That was real. That was actually true. But then what? He had written versions of this before. He had written the Dayton childhood and the second-hand laptop and the $180,000 wire transfer. He had written all of it. And every time, somewhere around the third paragraph, it stopped being a story and started being a resume. It stopped being his life and started being his brand. The whiskey appeared on the counter. He picked it up and took a slow sip without looking up. He wrote 3 more sentences. Deleted 2. Wrote 1 back. Deleted all 3. He rubbed his eyes. He stared at the screen. He did this for 40 minutes. At 12:22 a.m., he pushed the laptop slightly to the side, picked up the legal pad, and started reading Draft 11 out loud, very quietly, barely above a whisper, just his own voice in the empty bar, going through the motions of the speech like a man trying to convince himself he believed the words. He got to page 3. The bartender was restocking the far end of the shelf. She had her back to him. She stopped moving. He kept going. Page 4. The part where he talked about innovation. The part where he talked about the future of healthcare infrastructure. The part where Patricia had written the phrase human-centered technological evolution, and Cole had left it in because he could not think of a better way to say it, and at some point he had stopped trying. He finished the page. He set the pad down. He picked up his whiskey. The bartender turned around. She was looking at him with an expression he had not seen in a very long time. Not impressed. Not starstruck. Not calculating. She was looking at him the way his third-grade teacher used to look at him when he turned in homework. He clearly hadn't tried on, with a kind of quiet, matter-of-fact disappointment, like she expected better, and wasn't angry about it, just honest. He waited for her to say something. She said, "That's not going to work." Cole blinked. "Excuse me." She picked up a glass and started polishing it. The speech. "It's not going to work." Cole stared at her. In 10 years of running a company, no one, not an employee, not a board member, not a journalist, had spoken to him this directly without being paid to do so. He felt something strange move through him. Not offense. Something closer to shock. The shock of a window being open in a room, that has been sealed for too long. You were listening, he said. Hard not to. It's a quiet bar, and you think it won't work. She set the glass down. She picked up another one. I think it sounds like a man reading something someone else wrote about him. No offense. Cole opened his mouth, closed it, looked down at the legal pad. I wrote it, he said. Most of it. Then you wrote it for someone else's idea of who you are. She said it simply, without cruelty, the way you tell someone their shirt was on backwards. Just a fact. Just something they should probably know. Cole sat with that for a moment. You have a degree in communications? He asked. He meant it as a gentle deflection, a way of reestablishing the normal hierarchy of this interaction. He was a guest. She was the bartender. There were rules. Dropped out sophomore year, she said. Of where? Northwestern. Cole looked at her more carefully. Northwestern was not a school you dropped out of casually. Northwestern cost $60,000 a year. Dropping out of Northwestern meant something had gone wrong, or something had gone right in an unexpected direction, or both. He wanted to ask. He didn't. What would you change? He said instead. She stopped polishing. She looked at him steadily. About the speech? Yes. She seemed to consider whether this was a real question, whether he actually wanted an answer. She must have decided he did, because she set the glass down, crossed her arms, leaned against the back counter, and said, the whole middle section, the part about infrastructure and technological evolution, or whatever. You don't believe any of that. I built an entire company on that. I believe you built the company. I don't believe you care about what you just called it. She paused. What do you actually care about? The question landed like a stone dropped into still water. Cole felt the ripples move through him. What do you actually care about? No one had asked him that. Not recently. Not without an agenda attached to it. His board asked what he cared about in the context of quarterly projections. His PR team asked what he cared about in the context of brand positioning. Even his therapist, the one he saw twice a month via video call, asked what he cared about in the context of his productivity and stress management. Nobody had just asked him like this, like the answer mattered for its own sake. He looked at the whiskey glass. He thought about his mother walking to the bus stop. He thought about the doctor in Montana. He thought about the hospital in Memphis that had told him 2 years ago that their new patient record system, his system, had caught a medication error that would have killed a 63-year-old grandmother named Dorothy. He thought about how he had read that email in his car in a parking garage in San Francisco and sat there for a long time not moving. People, he said finally, I care about the people the technology never gets built for, the ones who are too far away or too poor or too forgotten for anyone to think they're worth the investment. The bar was very quiet. The bartender looked at him for a moment. Then she said, That's your speech. Cole looked up. Everything else is noise, she said. That one sentence. That's what you should say for 18 minutes. Everything else is just explaining that. Cole stared at her. She went back to restocking the shelf. He picked up his pen. He wrote the sentence on the legal pad. He stared at it. He wrote 3 more sentences beneath it, then 4 more. Then his hand couldn't keep up, and he switched to the laptop and started typing with both hands. Fast. The way he used to type when he was 22, and the ideas were coming faster than he could catch them. The way he hadn't typed in years, because somewhere along the way he had stopped being the person who typed and started being the person who approved what other people had typed. He wrote for 1 hour and 40 minutes without stopping. When he finally looked up, it was 2:09 a.m. His whiskey was long gone. There was a fresh glass of water on the coaster beside his laptop that he didn't remember being placed there. The bar was the same, amber light, dark wood, the quiet hum of the ventilation system. The bartender was at the far end of the bar, reading a book. She had given him the 1 hour and 40 minutes without a word, without a check-in, without hovering. She had just let him write. He realized he didn't know her name. He realized something else, too. He felt, and this was not a word Cole Harrington used about himself very often, lighter, like something that had been sitting on his chest for a long time, had quietly gotten up and left. He closed the laptop. Thank you, he said. She looked up from the book. Did you finish? First draft. Real one. She nodded once. Like that was the expected outcome. Like she had never doubted he would get there once he got out his own way. He paid his tab. He left a tip that was larger than the tab. He rode the elevator back up to the 14th floor. He lay down on the bed without changing clothes and stared at the ceiling. He thought about what she had said. That's your speech. He thought about the way she had said it, not to impress him, not to be remembered, just because it was true and she saw it and she said it. No angle, no agenda, just honesty, offered quietly across a dark bar at midnight to a man she had never seen before and would probably never see again. Cole Harrington fell asleep at 2:47 a.m., and for the first time in 3 weeks, he did not dream about standing on a stage with nothing to say. Her name was Maya Santos. She was 26 years old. She had grown up in Pilsen, the Mexican-American neighborhood on the southwest side of Chicago, in a narrow 2-story house that her parents had bought in 1998 and paid off, one grueling month at a time, over 22 years. Her father, Roberto Santos, was a retired electrician with bad knees and a garden in the backyard where he grew tomatoes and peppers and a specific variety of chili that he insisted you could not find anywhere else in Chicago. Her mother, Carmen, taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school and still brought her students' drawings home to put on the refrigerator even after 31 years of teaching, because she said the drawings reminded her why she did it. Maya was the first person in her family to get into Northwestern. She remembered the day the acceptance letter arrived. She remembered her mother crying at the kitchen table. She remembered her father going very quiet in the way he did when something moved him deeply, going quiet, and then standing up and going out to the garden, and staying there for a while, and when he came back his eyes were red, but he was smiling. She remembered thinking, I am going to make this mean something. She had lasted 2 years. Not because she wasn't smart enough. Anyone who had spent 5 minutes talking to Maya Santos knew that was not the issue. She had a mind that moved like water, finding the cracks in every argument, the shape beneath every surface, the question hiding inside every answer. Her professors noticed. One of them, a professor of economics named Dr. Whitfield, had told her in the middle of her sophomore year that she was the most naturally analytical student he had taught in 15 years. She left anyway, because of Danny. Danny Santos, her younger brother, was 20 years old and had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 7, and managed it with the particular focused discipline of someone who has never been allowed to take his body for granted. He checked his blood sugar 8 times a day. He carried glucose tabs in every pocket of every jacket he owned. He had never once, in 13 years, let the disease slow him down in any visible way. He played basketball. He worked part-time at a grocery store. He was funny and quick, and the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday and showed up. Then in October of Maya's sophomore year, Danny's insulin pump failed. Not a dramatic failure. A quiet one. A software glitch that caused it to misdeliver doses over a period of 3 weeks before anyone caught it. By the time they caught it, Danny was in the hospital with complications that required surgery, followed by 6 weeks of recovery, followed by a medical bill that arrived in a white envelope and sat on the kitchen table for 4 days before anyone opened it. $94,000. After insurance. Maya came home for the surgery and never went back to Northwestern. She did not frame this as sacrifice. She hated that word when people applied it to her. She had made a choice. Her family needed her income. Her brother needed her presence. The debt needed attacking. She got a job at a restaurant, then a bar, then moved to Meridian, which paid better and had better hours, and was exactly the kind of place where you could disappear into work and think clearly and read between customers. She read constantly. History, economics, behavioral psychology, technology. She read the kind of books that used to sit on the shelves in Dr. Whitfield's office, and that she had borrowed without asking and returned without mentioning. She read because her mind demanded it, because the world was endlessly, bewilderingly interesting, and she refused to let her circumstances determine the size of her curiosity. Danny was fine now, recovered, working, laughing. The debt was down to $31,000. Maya was fine, too. She told herself this regularly and mostly believed it. What she did not tell herself, what she tried very hard not to examine too closely, was what she had noticed, over 2 years of working at the Meridian, about the men who came and sat at her bar. The business travelers and the executives and the conference attendees and the men who clearly had more money than they knew what to do with and spent a remarkable amount of it on drinks and a remarkable amount of their time performing, always making sure the room knew who they were. She had watched them. She had listened to them. She had developed a very accurate internal calibration for the difference between a person who had earned their confidence and a person who had simply purchased theirs. The man who came in at 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday had earned his. She could tell immediately, not from his clothes. His clothes were deliberately ordinary, not from his watch. She had learned the hard way not to price people by their watches. Half the genuinely rich men she'd served wore a $30 Casio, and half the broke ones were drowning in debt for a Rolex. She could tell from the way he moved. He moved like a man who was used to being responsible for things. There was a weight to him. Not heaviness, weight. The kind that comes from having made real decisions with real consequences for a long time. She had heard him rehearsing, and she had told him the truth because it was the true thing, and she didn't see any reason to pretend it wasn't. That was just who Maya was. She couldn't turn it off. Her mother called it her gift. Her last boyfriend had called it exhausting. She called it being awake. She had not thought about him after he left. Or rather, she had thought about him exactly once. In the cab home at 3:15 a.m., in the way you think about something briefly before the exhaustion takes over. She had thought, I wonder if he actually uses any of that. Then she had thought about the grocery list. Then she had thought about nothing because she was asleep. The next night, Wednesday, she was on the same shift. The bar was busier. A conference in a hotel had ended, and a group of 12 men in identical blue lanyards descended on the Meridian at 9 p.m. and proceeded to be loud and enthusiastic and significantly less interesting than they thought they were. She made 17 old-fashions between 9 and 11. She listened to 3 separate men explain cryptocurrency to her. She smiled and nodded at appropriate intervals. She thought about the chapter she'd been reading in the behavioral economics book in her bag. At 12:10 a.m., the lanyard group paid their tab and left. At 12:17 a.m., the man in the gray T-shirt came back. He sat down in the same seat. He had the legal pad. He ordered the same whiskey. Maya poured it. She set it down. She said nothing. He said, I used it. She looked at him. The note. About what I actually care about. I rewrote the whole thing. How is it? She said. He thought about this seriously. Honest. Possibly too honest. There's no such thing, she said, and moved away to check on the other end of the bar. She could feel him thinking. She had developed, over 2 years, an almost physical sense of what people were doing at her bar even when she wasn't looking at them. Some people were escaping. Some were celebrating. Some were waiting for something. The gray T-shirt man was, she reached for the right word, processing, working something through. She recognized it because it was what she did herself at 2 a.m. in the kitchen when the apartment was quiet. He read sections of the new draft to her that night. Not performing, just reading, checking the sound of the words. And she told him when something was true and when something was slipping back into press release language. And he nodded and made marks on the legal pad. And they went back and forth like this for 2 hours in a way that felt so natural and unstrange that it was only later at home that Maya thought, that was strange. That was not what that was supposed to be. He came back Thursday. He came back Friday. On Friday night, he asked her name. Maya, she said. Cole, he said. She nodded. She filed the name away. She did not Google it. She had a personal rule about Googling customers. It changed the dynamic in ways she didn't like. It meant you were researching people instead of meeting them. She preferred to meet them. On Saturday, he asked her about the book she was reading. It was a book called Misbehaving by Richard Thaler, the behavioral economist who won the Nobel Prize for arguing that human beings are predictably irrational. Cole had read it. He had actually met Thaler once at a conference in 2019 and had a 20-minute conversation with him about nudge theory as applied to healthcare systems. He did not mention this. He talked about the book the way you talk about something you love. Not to show off that you've read it, but because you actually want to talk about it. Maya talked about it the same way. They went back and forth for 45 minutes in the empty bar, the conference draft, the hospital study in England, the cafeteria example, the pension savings data, and Cole felt, somewhere around a 20-minute mark, a sensation that he identified with some surprise as fun. This was fun. This conversation in this bar with this woman who poured drinks for a living and read Nobel Prize-winning economics at midnight was the most fun he had had in a very long time. He didn't leave until 2:30 a.m. He had a board call at 7 a.m. He came back Sunday. Sunday night. The bar was quiet again. He came in at 11. He didn't bring the legal pad. He didn't bring the laptop. He just came in, sat down, ordered the whiskey, and when Maya appeared, he said, "Tell me something." She looked at him with that steady, unbothered expression. "About what?" "Anything you're thinking about." Maya poured the whiskey. She considered the request. Most people at her bar wanted to talk about themselves. This was the first time someone had opened by asking to hear her. She didn't make a big deal of it. She just answered honestly. "I'm thinking about the insulin pumper call," she said. Cole's expression shifted slightly. "Which one?" MedCore's G7 system. They issued a voluntary recall 2 months ago. Said it affected about 12,000 units. "I don't think the number is right." Cole set down the whiskey. "What do you mean?" "The adverse event reports on the FDA database. I've been reading through them. The number of reported incidents doesn't match what a 12,000 unit recall should produce statistically. Either they're underreporting or the distribution of the affected units is different than they said, or..." She stopped. She made a small motion with her hand, the gesture of someone who is aware they're going too deep too fast, and is giving you the option to opt out. Cole did not opt out, or the algorithm they use to identify affected units has a flaw, he said. Maya looked at him carefully. "Yes. You're reading FDA adverse event databases at midnight." "I read fast." He looked at her for a long moment. "Why?" She picked up a glass and polished it. She thought about Danny in the hospital. She thought about the white envelope on the kitchen table. She thought about the software glitch that nobody caught for 3 weeks. "Personal reasons," she said. He didn't push. She noted that. He filed it away instead of pressing, the way a person does when they understand that some doors open on their own schedule. They talked about the MedCore recall for an hour. Cole knew the medical device industry better than she had expected. Which is to say, he knew it well because his company processed health data for half the nation's hospital networks, and he had spent years learning every adjacent system. He asked smart questions. He pushed back on 2 of her statistical assumptions in ways that forced her to sharpen them. She pushed back on one of his in a way that made him stop and go quiet for a moment and then say, "You're right," with the simple directness of a person who has no ego about being corrected. She noticed that too. When he left that night, at 1:45 a.m., Maya stood alone in the empty bar for a moment before starting the closing tasks. She was aware of something she hadn't been aware of an hour ago, a shift in the air, a change in the temperature of things. Like a season changing, not dramatically, not all at once, just the first night where you walk outside and think, "Oh, something is different now," she told herself. He is a guest at this hotel. He will check out and go home, and that will be the end of it. She believed herself. For about 12 hours. Monday morning. Cole was in the conference room on the 14th floor with Patricia and his chief of staff, David, and 2 members of the board who had flown in for a strategy review. The meeting had started at 8. It was now 10:30. Someone had put a plate of pastries in the middle of the table, and nobody had touched them, which was a sign that the meeting was going poorly. It was not going poorly because of anything strategic. The numbers were good. The expansion plan was solid. The TEDx prep, Patricia reported, was coming together beautifully based on the new draft Cole had sent her Sunday morning. She had called it transformational. The board member on the left, a man named Gerald who had been on the board for 11 years and had the particular energy of someone who had been saying the same things in boardrooms for 40 years, had called it a significant improvement. The meeting was going poorly because Cole was not there. Not physically. Physically, he was in the chair at the head of the table, with his coffee and his notebook. But the part of him that was supposed to be running the meeting, the sharp, focused, 3 moves ahead part, was somewhere else. It was in a bar at midnight, talking about FDA databases. Patricia said his name twice before he heard her. "Sorry," he said. "What were you saying?" She looked at him with the expression of someone who has worked for a person for 6 years and is choosing her next words carefully. "I was saying The TEDx organizer wants to do a run-through on Wednesday. On site, full room. Wednesday works, Cole said. You'll need to be off book by then. I will be. Gerald looked up from his notes. Cole, you all right? Fine, Cole said. What's next? What was next was a 45-minute discussion about a potential acquisition that Cole had been thinking about for 8 months and normally would have driven with the focus intensity of a man who loved this particular kind of problem. He participated. He said the right things. He asked 2 questions that impressed Gerald, which was not difficult because Gerald was impressed by relatively basic things, but still. But in the back of his mind, underneath all of it, was a question he could not shake. The insulin pumper call. She had been reading FDA adverse event reports at midnight because of personal reasons. She had said it the way people say things when the personal reason is large and close and not ready to be talked about. Cole knew what that sounded like. He had a catalog of things he said in that same tone of voice. He wanted to know what had happened to her. He wanted to know in a particular way that you want to know something about a specific person, not general curiosity, not the polite interest you extend to people in your orbit, but the actual pointed, slightly uncomfortable desire to understand one person more fully. He had not felt this in a long time. He had felt attracted to people in the years since his divorce. He had gone on dates, carefully arranged by mutual friends who thought they were helping. He had met accomplished, interesting, attractive women, and he had been pleasant and engaged and come home afterward and felt nothing change. This was different. He didn't know why yet. He was not sure he was ready to examine why. He knew he was going back to the bar tonight. He went back to the bar that night, and the night after, and the night after that. By Thursday of that week, Maya had started saving him the seat at the end of the bar without thinking about it. She didn't register that she was doing this until Wednesday night, when a man in a business suit sat down in that seat at 10 p.m., and she felt a flash of something she would not have called irritation if anyone had asked, but which functioned exactly like irritation, and which resolved itself when Cole came in at midnight and took a seat 2 spots down with the easy adaptability of a man who did not require things to be arranged for him. She moved the man in the business suit to a different section. She registered that she had done this. She filed it away without comment. Thursday night, Cole arrived and was quiet in a different way than usual. Not the productive quiet of someone working through an idea. A heavy quiet, the kind with weather in it. Maya poured his whiskey without being asked and set it down and said nothing and went about her business. And eventually, around 12:40 a.m., he said, "My mother's birthday would have been today." Maya stopped moving. "Would have been," she said. "She died 4 years ago. February." Maya stood still at the other end of the bar. She did not say she was sorry in the automatic reflex way. She let it sit for a moment in the air between them, because sometimes that was what things deserved. Then she said, "What was she like?" Cole looked up. Most people, he had learned, when you mentioned someone who had died, wanted to express condolence and move on. The condolence was real, but it was also often a way of closing the subject. He had gotten very used to the subject being closed. Maya was asking him to open it. He opened it. He talked about Margaret Harrington for 40 minutes. The diner, the bus stop, the way she used to leave notes in his lunch when he was a kid. Not sweet notes. Practical ones like, "Eat the apple. It doesn't keep in your math test this Wednesday." And how he had saved every single one of them in a shoebox that he still had somewhere, probably in storage, probably in a unit in Dayton that he paid for and never visited. He talked about how she had never once complained about the things she went without, so he could have things. Not once. And how, when he finally had money and could give her things, she didn't want most of them. She wanted a new water heater because the old one was unreliable. She wanted a better car because she was tired of the transmission grinding. She wanted to pay off the neighbor's kids' medical school loans, anonymously, because the family was struggling, and it was the kind of thing that needed doing. She sounds like someone who knew what mattered, Maya said. She always knew, Cole said. I'm still figuring it out. Maya looked at him. Something in her expression shifted, very slightly, very briefly, in a way that she immediately composed back to neutral. But Cole caught it. He caught it the way you catch a glimpse of something through a window as you're passing, just a flash, but enough to know something is there. He did not say anything about it. He filed it away. Friday morning, Cole woke up early and did something he had not done in 6 months. He went for a run. Not on a treadmill, in the hotel gym. An actual run outside in the cold Chicago morning, down the riverwalk along the Chicago River, past the bridges and the architecture and the early joggers and the delivery trucks, running at a pace that wasn't efficient or tracked or optimized, just running because his body wanted to move and the air was cold and he searched for the word, awake. He felt awake. He ran for 50 minutes and came back to the hotel sweating and out of breath and stood in the elevator looking at himself in the mirror door. 53 years ago, he'd been a kid in Dayton standing by a kitchen window watching his mother walk to the bus stop. 23 years ago, he'd been crying in a car after a wire transfer. 4 years ago, he'd been standing at a graveside in February thinking about a shoebox full of notes he'd never thrown away. Now he was here in a hotel elevator in Chicago, heading up to a 14th floor room, about to give a speech in 2 weeks that might actually be true, and thinking, without having given himself permission to, about a bartender at midnight. He stood under the shower for a long time. He had a 9 a.m. call. He took it, then another, then a working lunch with David about the acquisition, then a 2-hour draft review of the TEDx script, the real one, the honest one. And Patricia read it quietly, and at the end she said, in a voice slightly different than her professional voice, "Cole, this is really good." He went back to the bar that night. Maya was there. He sat down. She poured. He said, "How long have you been at Northwestern before you left?" She looked at him steadily. 2 years. What were you studying? Economics, with a focus on behavioral health systems. Cole absorbed this. And you left because... Personal reasons, she said. The same phrase. The same tone. He nodded. He didn't push. She polished a glass. He waited. Sometimes silence was the most honest question. After about 3 minutes, she said, "My brother got sick. The bills didn't care whether I was in school or not." Cole looked at her. Medical? Diabetes. He had an insulin pump that malfunctioned. She said it simply. She had said it enough times in her head that it no longer sounded catastrophic when it came out, even though when she pictured Danny in that hospital bed, it still felt like someone squeezing her chest. "He's fine now, but the bills..." She made a small gesture. The gesture for, you know how it goes, except Cole was a billionaire. So he probably didn't know exactly how it went, and he knew that she knew that he probably didn't know, and they both let that sit there without pretending. "Is that why you were reading the FDA database?" he said. "Yes." "Because the pump that malfunctioned was a software issue that should have been caught." "Yes." She set the glass down. She picked up another. "I'm not angry about it anymore. I was for a long time. Now I'm just interested in why it keeps happening and what it would take to actually fix it." Cole looked at her for a long moment. He thought about Dorothy, the 63-year-old grandmother in Memphis, the medication error, his system catching in time. He thought about how he had built Harrington systems partly for that reason, for the people whose safety depended on software working right, for the people who couldn't afford for it to fail. He thought about how he had explained this to exactly nobody in his personal life in the last 5 years, because nobody in his personal life had ever asked the right question. He thought about how Maya had asked him the right question on the first night she'd ever seen him. "What do you actually care about?" He thought about how she had gotten the same answer from a completely different direction, through a hospital bed and a white envelope and a $94,000 bill, and 2 years of reading FDA databases at midnight. He thought about the word that comes right before the word he was not ready to use yet. He said, "What would you do with a year at a place like the Center for Healthcare Innovation if money wasn't an issue?" Maya looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you could design the thing you want to build, the actual fix of the thing you're reading about, what would it look like?" She was quiet for a moment. She was deciding whether this was a real question. She decided it was. She talked for an hour. Cole listened, not politely, not with the managed, nodding attention of a man in a meeting. He listened the way he used to listen to things before listening became professional skill, with actual interest, actual engagement, pushing back when something was unclear, asking follow-up questions that showed he had heard and processed and was thinking about the next level. She had ideas that were good. She had ideas that were genuinely brilliant. The kind of brilliant that comes from combining theoretical knowledge with lived experience in a way that you can't get from a think tank or a graduate program. She had the FDA database figures memorized. She had a framework for what an algorithmic audit system would look like. She had thought about the political barriers and the industry incentives and the regulatory gaps. She had thought about all of this by herself at midnight, behind a bar. Cole felt something he could only describe as recognition. The specific, rare recognition of meeting a mind that works the way yours works, that cares about what you care about, that sees the same thing you see from a different window in the same house. He did not say any of this. He said, "You should write this down, not for someone else, for yourself, like a proposal." She looked at him with that expression, the one that was calibrating whether he was serious. "Why?" "Because it's worth writing down." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'll think about it." He paid his tab. He left the tip. He stood up. He said, "I'm here through Tuesday for the TEDx." She nodded. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. They both understood something had changed in the temperature of things again, and neither of them was ready to name it. And that was fine, because some things don't need to be named to be real. Saturday night was different. Saturday night, Maya came in for her shift and found the bar full. A private event on the mezzanine had spilled downstairs, and suddenly the Meridian was loud with particular energy of wealthy Chicago. The laughter that was a little too loud, the suits that were a little too perfect, the name-dropping that floated through the room like background music. She worked fast and efficiently through it, the way she always did. And somewhere around 11 p.m. she became aware that Cole was at his usual seat, sitting in the middle of the crowd, looking utterly unlike himself. He was wearing a suit, a very good suit, the kind that cost more than she made in 3 months, worn with the ease of a man who wore such things regularly and got no particular pleasure from them. He had clearly come down from something, an event, a dinner, some obligation, and stopped in the bar on the way through. He was also, she noticed, talking to a woman. The woman was blonde and polished and had the particular poise of someone accustomed to being looked at. She was laughing at something Cole had said, leaning toward him slightly, her hand resting briefly on his arm. Cole was being pleasant. He was good at being pleasant. He had the professional social warmth of a man who had spent years in rooms exactly like this one, saying the right things, making people feel seen. Maya watched this from across the bar, with her neutral expression firmly in place. She thought, this is who he actually is. This is his actual life. The midnight conversations and the legal pad and the whiskey and the FDA databases. That is the man stepping outside his life for a week. This, the suit, the event, the woman with the polished laugh. This is the life. She poured a drink for the man in front of her. She did not look back at Cole's seat. Around midnight, the crowd thinned. The blonde woman drifted away toward a group near the door. The noise level dropped. Maya was restocking the back shelf when she heard his voice. "You're angry," he said. She turned around. He was alone at his seat. The suit jacket now draped over the back of the stool, his sleeves rolled up. He was looking at her with an expression that was direct, not apologetic. Direct. "I'm not," she said. She kept her voice level because she was not, in fact, certain whether she was telling the truth. "You've been on the other end of the bar for 40 minutes. I've been working." "You're usually," he stopped himself. He started again. "I'm not. There's nothing. She's a board member's daughter. I've met her twice. Tonight included." Maya looked at him. He was not performing. He was not explaining himself out of guilt. He was explaining himself because he had noticed something in her that he didn't want to leave uncorrected. That was different. "You don't owe me an explanation," she said. "No," he agreed, "but I wanted to give you one anyway." The bar was quiet. Maya set down the bottle she was holding. She came down to his end of the bar and stood across from him and looked at him straight on. She said, "What are we doing?" Cole met her eyes. "I think we're becoming friends. You have a lot of friends who work behind bars at midnight." "No," he said, "I don't have a lot of friends." She believed him, not in a sad way, in a true way. She believed him the way you believe something when the evidence has been accumulating for days, and it all points in the same direction. Cole Harrington, for all his $4.7 billion, was genuinely, structurally lonely. Not for lack of company. For lack of people who showed up as themselves. You leave Tuesday, she said. Yes. After the TEDx. Yes. She nodded. She picked up the bottle again. She went back to work. He stayed until 1:30 a.m. They talked about his mother, about the lawsuit that had nearly derailed the company in 2019, about the acquisition he was considering, and the thing about it that kept bothering him, which was that the founder of the company being acquired was 29 and had built something genuinely good, and Cole was not sure the acquisition would preserve what made it good, about whether it was possible to scale something without crushing the part of it that mattered. She said, "The problem with acquiring small things is that you're usually acquiring the person, not the product, and you can't keep a person." Cole looked at her. She said, "If the 29-year-old's passion is the asset, then the question isn't the acquisition, it's the retention." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You should not be working in a bar." She looked at him without expression. "I know," she said, not bitterly, not sadly, just honestly, like she had already made peace with the gap between where she was and where she was built to be, and was still working the gap close, one day at a time, one midnight red at a time. Cole went upstairs that night and did not sleep for a long time. He was thinking about the gap. He was thinking about the things that fall through the gaps, the people who were built for more and were spending themselves one shift at a time while the world looked the other way. He was thinking about Danny Santos and the white envelope and the $94,000 bill. He was thinking about Maya reading FDA databases by herself in the bar at midnight. He was thinking about what he could do about it, and whether it was his place to do anything, and what the line was between wanting to help someone and wanting to change their life without being asked. He was thinking about Tuesday. He lay in the dark of the 14th-floor hotel room and listened to the city below and thought about the word he still wasn't using. Sunday was quiet. He came in at 11:30. She was there. The bar was nearly empty. They fell into it the way they always did now. Easy, direct, like two people who had known each other for years instead of 8 days. He asked about her parents. She told him about Roberto and the garden. She told him about Carmen and the drawings on the refrigerator. She told him about growing up in Pilsen, the tamale vendors and the murals on the walls of buildings, and the way the neighborhood had changed and was still changing, and what it felt like to love a place that the city was slowly pricing out from under itself. She told him about the old women on the block who remembered what it used to be, and the young families who were now priced out to farther neighborhoods, and the particular grief of watching a community thin out, slowly, invisibly, one moving truck at a time. Cole listened. He thought about Dayton. He thought about the neighborhood he'd grown up in and what it looked like now, the last time he'd been through. Quieter, emptier, the diner on the corner of 5th and Main closed with plywood on the windows. He thought about the particular invisibility of the places where people who were not wealthy lived, and how that invisibility was not accidental. It was structural, and structures could be changed. "What would you do," he said, "if you had the resources?" For Pilsen. Maya thought about it for a real minute, not a polite pause, a real one. Then she said, "I'd start with healthcare access. That's the one that compounds. When you don't have reliable healthcare, everything else is harder. You miss work. You make worse decisions. You're managing crisis instead of building anything. Fix healthcare access and you buy people time. And time is the only thing that actually lets you change your own circumstances." Cole nodded slowly. "I'd also start a fund for working people who need a gap year," she said. "Like me, people who are intelligent and have real ideas but can't afford to step back from survival long enough to build something. 2 years of not having to worry about bills would change." She stopped. She made the small gesture again. "Would change everything." Cole said, "Yes." He was quiet. She looked at him. "I don't say this stuff to be pitted, by the way. I say it because it's true and worth saying." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm listening." Monday morning, Cole was up at 6. He went through the TEDx script 4 times. It was good. It was the best thing he'd ever written. And he knew it the way you know when you finally said the thing you actually meant to say. He thought about what Maya had told him on the first night. "That's your speech." She had been right. She had been right immediately, without effort, the way people are right about things when they are paying genuine attention. He had a thought. He put it away. He took it back out. He put away again. He had breakfast. He had 3 calls. He went through the acquisition memo for the 4th time and made 2 margin notes that both referenced things Maya had said about retention and about the 29-year-old and about the gap between acquiring a product and keeping a person. He had lunch alone at a window table in the hotel restaurant, looking out at the Chicago street, watching the city move. A woman pushing a stroller. 2 men in construction vests. A delivery driver unloading boxes in the cold. The city doing its thing. All those lives running parallel, none of them intersecting unless something made them. He took out his phone. He opened the browser. He typed, Maya Santos Chicago Northwestern Economics. He stared at the search bar for a moment. He closed the browser. He put the phone face down on the table. He thought, you have known her for 8 days. You have had 8 conversations behind a bar after midnight. She is a stranger, technically, a very specific, very real, very singular stranger, but still. He thought about Tuesday. He thought about the 14th-floor elevator. He thought about the car that would come at 6 a.m. and take him to the TEDx venue, and then to the airport. He thought about San Francisco, where his apartment had a view of the bay and a kitchen that a very good interior designer had chosen every element of, and where he rarely cooked because there was a chef who came 3 days a week. He thought about the weekly board calls and the acquisition timeline, and Patricia's meticulous calendar. He thought about an empty bar at midnight. He thought, what are you doing? He thought, I know exactly what I'm doing. He went back to the bar that night. Monday night. One night before Tuesday. She knew it was the last night. He knew she knew. Neither of them said it. They talked until 3 a.m. They talked about everything and nothing. The kind of conversation that moves fast and slow at the same time, that covers philosophy and memory, and food and failure, and one joke that made her laugh so fully that she put down the glass she was holding, and he felt the laugh like something warm moving to the room. He had not heard her laugh like that before. He had heard her be amused. This was different. This was unguarded. This was Maya Santos all the way out, nothing held back, just joy at something funny, and he thought, I want to hear that again. I want to hear that many more times. At 2:47 a.m., she said, do you ever think about the version of your life that didn't happen? He looked at her. What do you mean? I mean, you became this. She gestured vaguely, meaning the $1 billion, the company, the Forbes cover. But somewhere along the way, there were other versions, other choices. And those people, those other versions, they're just gone. They never got to exist. Cole thought about this. I think about the version that didn't leave Dayton, he said, who stayed and worked at the factory. I think about him sometimes. I wonder if he was happier. Do you think he was? No, Cole said. I think he was comfortable. That's different. Maya nodded slowly. What about you? He said. I think about the version that graduated from Northwestern, she said, who went straight into a PhD program, who never had to choose between her brother and her degree. She was quiet for a moment. I don't think she was better than me. I just think she got to build some things that I haven't built yet. Yet, that word, Cole filed it, the stubbornness of it, the refusal to let the yet become a never. You'll build them, he said. She looked at him. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She just looked at him with those steady dark eyes, and he understood that she was neither asking for reassurance nor dismissing his statement. She was just receiving it, the way she received everything, with full attention, without performance. At 3:02 a.m., she said, I should close up. He nodded. He stayed in the seat. She began the closing tasks, wiping down the bar, covering the bottles, running the last numbers. He watched her work. She moved with a focused competence that he found. The word arrived without permission. Beautiful. Not in a simple way. Beautiful the way a well-built thing is beautiful. The right material, the right structure, everything in its place for a reason. She finished. She came back to the bar. She stood across from him in the amber light of the closed meridian, and they looked at each other. Thank you, he said, for the first night, for telling me the truth. You already knew the truth, she said. You just needed someone to say it out loud. Still, he said. She nodded. He stood up. He put on his jacket. He looked at her one more time. He said, I meant what I said. You should write it down. The proposal. The healthcare audit framework. It's real and it's good and it deserves to exist in a form that someone beside you can see. She said, maybe I will. He said, good night, Maya. She said, good night, Cole. He walked to the elevator. The doors closed. He rode up to 14. He stood in the room in the dark for a long time. Then he sat down at the desk. He opened his laptop. He opened a new email. He typed an address he knew by memory. The director of the Harrington Foundation, the charitable arm of his company, which funded exactly the kind of work Maya had described, which had been running for 6 years, which was always looking for exactly the kind of mind that had been working behind a bar in this hotel for 2 years. He wrote 3 paragraphs. He stopped. He read them back. He thought about the line between helping and overreaching. He thought about what she would want. He thought about the version of this that was genuinely generous and the version that was underneath about making himself feel like he had done something for her before he disappeared. He thought about the difference. He deleted the email. He closed the laptop. He went to bed. Tuesday. TEDx day. Cole woke at 5:15 and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark of the hotel room and ran through the speech in his head. All of it, beginning to end. He knew it completely. Not in the memorized, mechanical way, but in the way you know something true. It was inside him, and it would come out when he opened his mouth, because it was his, and he had finally stopped trying to make it someone else's. He showered. He dressed. He went downstairs. The hotel lobby at 6 a.m. was quiet. Early travelers. A breakfast buffet just opening. A tired-looking man behind the front desk. Cole walked through it, and something pulled him toward the Meridian, even though he knew it was closed. Knew it wouldn't open until 11. Knew she wouldn't be there. He stopped at the entrance. The bar was dark, except for a strip of ambient light along the back wall. The bottles caught it. The bar stools were turned upside down on the counter, the way they were when the bar was closed. He stood there for a moment. Then the car arrived, and he went to the TEDx. He stopped at the entrance. The bar was dark, except for a strip of ambient light along the back wall. The bottles caught it. The bar stools were turned upside down on the counter, the way they were when the bar was closed. He stood there for a moment. Then the car arrived, and he went to the TEDx. The venue was a theater in the West Loop. 1,200 seats, a single spotlight on a round stage. Cole had been backstage for 20 minutes, and he was fine. Not nervous. That was new. He was aware of the fact that he was not nervous the way you're aware of a noise that has stopped. As an absence. The stone that usually lived in his chest was not there. Patricia appeared at his elbow. 5 minutes. I know. You have the opening down? Yes. The transition to the Memphis section. I have it. She looked at him. She had worked for him for 6 years, and she had a very accurate read on his states. She looked at him now and said, quietly, not in her professional voice, "You're different this week." He looked at her. Good different or bad different? I don't know yet, she said honestly. Then, good, I think. He went on stage. The spotlight hit him. He looked out at 1,200 faces, the blurred, expectant, anonymous mass of them, and he opened his mouth and he said, "My mother worked double shifts at a diner for 22 years, so I could have options." She never complained. She never asked for anything in return. And she never once told me that what she was doing was extraordinary, because to her, it wasn't. It was just what needed doing. I've spent 30 years building a company. I've made a lot of money. And I've met a lot of brilliant people. And the most brilliant person I've met in the last decade, the person whose thinking changed his speech, whose mind changed something in me, makes $800 a week and works the midnight shift. And the reason that's true, the reason our best minds are sometimes hidden behind bars and hotels at midnight, is a failure that we can fix. And that's what I want to talk about today. The audience was absolutely still. Cole talked for 19 minutes. He talked about Dorothy in Memphis. He talked about the insulin pump industry and the structural failures in medical device software regulation. He talked about what it cost, in human terms, not financial terms, when brilliant people couldn't access the resources their minds deserved. He talked about the gap. He talked about what it would take to close it. He said 3 things that were genuinely new in the public conversation about healthcare equity and technology. He said 2 things that made a journalist in the third row start typing very fast on her laptop. He did not say Maya's name, but she was in every sentence. When it was over, the audience stood up. Cole stood in the spotlight and received the applause with the expression of a man who was only partially there. The other part of him was somewhere else, in an amber-lit bar, hearing the words, "That's your speech." Backstage, Patricia was crying. This had never happened before in 6 years. "Patricia, give me a minute," she said. He gave her a minute. His phone had 47 notifications. He looked at none of them. He got in the car at 11:15 a.m. and rode to O'Hare and sat in the first-class lounge and thought about what he was doing and whether he was brave enough to do it. He opened his phone. He found the Harrington Foundation website. He navigated to the application page for the Research Fellows Program, a 2-year fully funded fellowship for individuals with significant ideas in healthcare equity. He took a screenshot of the page and wrote a short note, just a link and 2 sentences. He stared at it. He thought, "I don't have her number." He thought, "I didn't ask for her number." He thought about why he hadn't asked. He thought about Tuesday morning coming in the car at 6 a.m. and how there was a version of last night where he had asked and she had given it and they had exchanged numbers and maybe made some vague plan. And then what? Then he flies home and she's behind the bar and they text occasionally. And the distance does what distance does. That wasn't. He didn't finish the thought. He boarded the plane. He flew to San Francisco. He went home to the apartment with the bay view and the kitchen the designer had chosen. And he sat down on the couch, and the apartment was very quiet, and he thought, "I left something in Chicago." 3 weeks passed. Cole gave the TEDx talk, which was posted online the following Monday, and which by Wednesday had 600,000 views, and by the following Monday had 4 million. The clip of the opening, "The most brilliant person I've met in the last decade makes $800 a week," was everywhere. It was on Twitter. It was on LinkedIn. It was on the morning news. A senator from Massachusetts quoted it in a committee hearing. A columnist in the New York Times called it the most honest thing a tech billionaire has said publicly in a decade. Cole read none of this. Patricia sent him a daily summary. He skimmed it. He worked. He did the acquisition on terms that preserved the 29-year-old founder's operational control with a 5-year retention package that Patricia called unusually generous and that David said was strategically unconventional. Cole said, "It's strategically correct. You're acquiring the person, not the product." Patricia wrote it down, the way she always wrote down things he said that were true. He had dinner with 2 friends on a Thursday in Pacific Heights. He was there and not there. He was good company, and somewhere else. He started going on long runs again. Bay Bridge, Crissy Field, the Embarcadero. Running in the early morning when the fog was still low and the city was just starting and the air tasted like cold and water. He ran like he was going somewhere, even though he always ended up back at the same apartment. He thought about Maya. He thought about what she had said. "I'll think about it," about the proposal. He wondered if she had thought about it. He wondered if she had written it. He wondered if she was still on the midnight shift. He wondered about the FDA database and the Medcore recall, and whether she had found the flaw she thought she'd found. He had Google available to him. He did not use it. On a Thursday evening, 22 days after leaving Chicago, he was in his office on the 52nd floor, looking at the bay as the sun went down, turning the water gold and then rose and then a deep, aching blue. Patricia knocked and came in with 2 printed pages. "Something came in through the foundation," she said. Her voice was careful in a specific way. "A fellowship application, research proposal, healthcare systems focus." She set the pages on his desk. "The writing is exceptional. Dr. Whitfield at Northwestern submitted a supporting letter. Apparently she was a student of his. He calls her the most analytically gifted student he's taught in 20 years. She paused. "Her name is Maya Santos." Cole looked at the pages. He did not pick them up immediately. He just looked at them. Patricia stood there. After a moment, he said, "Is it good?" "The proposal." "It's excellent," she said. "I had Dr. Reeves look at it before I brought it to you. She said the insulin pump audit framework is..." Patricia looked at her notes. Quote, "The clearest articulation of the regulatory gap problem I have seen from a non-institutional researcher." End quote. Cole was quiet. "Does this need to go through the standard review process?" Patricia asked. "Yes." Cole said immediately, "Full standard process." Independent committee. No special handling. Patricia nodded. She picked the pages back up. Patricia? She stopped. She applied on her own? As far as I can tell, Patricia said. Application came in through the standard portal. Cole nodded. He turned back to the window. He looked at the bay going dark. He thought about the fellowship application, and the standard portal, and the independent committee. He thought about Maya Santos sitting at a kitchen table in Pilsen, writing down the things she had thought about at midnight behind a bar. He thought about the word he had been not using for 22 days. He thought, all right, fine. He said it in the empty office. To no one. Just said it quietly to the darkening bay. Love. The fellowship committee met on a Tuesday. Cole was not in the room. This was by explicit instruction. Any application that had come to the committee's attention through his office was to be reviewed without his presence to ensure objectivity. He had written this rule himself years ago, precisely to prevent the foundation from becoming a vehicle for his personal preferences. He sat in his office that Tuesday and worked on 3 other things simultaneously and thought about what he was doing and whether he had any right to do it. The committee took 5 days. On Friday afternoon, Patricia knocked. They've made a decision, she said. Maya Santos is a finalist. Top 3 of 42 applicants. Cole absorbed this. The committee wants to do finalist interviews next week. Chicago is a preferred location. There's a healthcare symposium that we've been planning to attend anyway. Fine, Cole said. You won't be in the interviews, Patricia said. Not a question. A statement of the rule. Correct, Cole said. She left. He sat with the word he had said to the bay. He thought about what came next. Not what he wanted to come next. What was right. There was a difference. He had money. He had influence. He had a foundation that could change someone's life with a 2-year fellowship. These were facts. The question was what you did with facts when they intersected with something personal. The question was whether this was still genuinely about her merit, which it clearly and objectively was. The committee had said so independently, or whether he was confusing generous intent with something else. He was very honest with himself about this, which was something he had learned to do over years of making decisions with large consequences. He examined his motives the way you examine something under bright light, turning it, looking for the flaw. He found this. He wanted to see her. That was real. That was personal and separate from the fellowship. And if he conflated those 2 things, the fellowship and the wanting to see her, he would corrupt both of them. He would make the fellowship feel like a gift he was giving her, which meant she would owe him something, which meant the dynamic between them would change into something neither of them wanted it to be. He could not let that happen. So here was what he decided. The fellowship would proceed exactly as it would have proceeded if he had never met Maya Santos. The committee would make their decision. If she was selected, she would be selected on merit, and separately, independently, in a different category entirely. Cole Harrington was going to get on a plane to Chicago, not for the fellowship, for himself. He flew to Chicago on a Sunday evening. He checked into the Langham. He took the elevator to the 14th floor. He put his bag down. He sat on the edge of the bed. He thought about what exactly he was doing. He was doing the thing you do when you have finally stopped pretending that something isn't happening. He was doing the thing that required being willing to be wrong about everything. About her feelings, about his feelings, about whether what existed between them was something real or just a beautiful anomaly that belonged to a particular hotel bar at particular midnight and nowhere else. He ordered room service. He watched the news. At 11:30 p.m., he put on jeans and a gray T-shirt. He rode the elevator down. He walked through the lobby. He turned left into the Meridian. The bar was quiet. Tuesday night quiet. One couple at the far end. A man alone with a laptop near the door. Behind the bar, Maya Santos was restocking the far shelf with her back to him. He recognized the posture, the focused, efficient energy, the not performing anything quality. He sat down at the end of the bar. She turned around. She looked at him. The expression on her face moved through 3 things in about 2 seconds. Surprise, something that might have been a controlled outer edge of joy, and then the composed, neutral surface she wore like armor. But he had caught the middle one. He had caught it clearly, and there was no taking it back. She set a glass of water on a coaster. She said, "You're back." I'm back, he said. The TEDx was good, she said. She said it simply, without inflation, the way she said true things. I watched it. Cole absorbed this. Which part? He said. She looked at him steadily. She said, the opening. He nodded. She said, you didn't name me. No, he said. Why not? He thought about how to say the next thing accurately. Because it wasn't about making you known, he said. It was about making the idea known. The idea is bigger than both of us. She absorbed this. She turned away to pour the whiskey he hadn't ordered yet. She set it down. He said, you applied to the foundation. The air changed. She looked at him. Her expression was steady, but something beneath it was very alert, very careful. I did, she said. On your own, he said. On my own, she said. You didn't tell me you were going to. You didn't ask. I didn't want you to think I was offering it, he said, before you applied. I didn't want it to be. I didn't want you to apply because of me. She looked at him for a long moment. I applied because of the proposal, she said. The one I wrote, the one you told me to write down. She paused. I applied because it was good, and because Dr. Whitfield read it and said it was good, and because someone from the Foundation's committee reached out to say my application was being seriously considered. Another pause. I applied for me, not for you. I know, Cole said. Do you? She said it without hostility. Just, do you actually know this? Yes, he said. He meant it completely. She nodded. They sat with that for a moment. Then Cole said, I'm not here about the fellowship. The fellowship is its own thing with its own people, and it will go where it goes. I'm here. He stopped. He started again. I'm here because I spent 22 days in San Francisco running along the bay at 6 a.m. and thinking about this bar. Maya looked at him. I'm here, he said, because I think I left something here. The bar was quiet. The couple at the far end had their heads together, talking softly. The man with the laptop was gone. Maya stood across the bar from Cole, and she looked at him with those steady dark eyes, and she was doing the thing she always did, paying full attention, processing honestly, not performing anything. She said, You live in San Francisco. Yes. Your company is in San Francisco. Headquarters, yes. I live in Pilsen. I know. I work the midnight shift. I know. You're a billionaire, she said, not unkindly, just as a fact, just as one of the structural facts of the situation. Yes, he said. And you think we should... What? What do you think we should do with all of that? Cole looked at her. He had thought about this. He had thought about it carefully, on the runs and in the apartment and on the plane. He said, I think we should have dinner. Tomorrow night. Not here. Somewhere where you're not working. And I think we should see what it's like when neither of us is behind anything. Maya was quiet. I think, Cole said, that you're the most interesting person I've met in 10 years. And I think I was an idiot for getting on a plane without asking for your number. And I think, he stopped, he looked at the glass of whiskey. He looked back up at her. I think you already know all of this. I think you've known it. And I think the question is whether you trust it. The bar was very quiet. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I get off at 2. Cole looked at her. Not tonight, she said. Tomorrow. I have a shift change tomorrow. I'm off at 2 p.m. Cole felt something move through him that was warm and sure and a little like the sensation of a window being opened. 2 p.m., he said. There's a place in Pilsen, she said, on the 18th Street strip. They make the best chilaquiles in Chicago. My father goes there every Sunday, and he has strong opinions about this. 2 p.m., Cole said again. She picked up a glass and started polishing it. She was hiding a smile, not very successfully. He paid his tab. He left the tip. He did not leave immediately. He sat for another hour, and they talked about the TEDx, about the 4 million views, about the senator from Massachusetts and the New York Times column, and what it felt like to have said a true thing loudly enough for a lot of people to hear it. She asked him 2 sharp questions about what he actually planned to do beyond the speech, because a speech was one thing, and change was another, and she had a very low tolerance for the gap between the two. He answered honestly. He told her about 3 specific things already in motion. She pushed back on one of them. He listened. He made a note. At 1:47 a.m., he stood up. He put on his jacket. He looked at her. She was already looking at him. 2 p.m., he said. 2 p.m., she said. He walked to the elevator. The doors closed. He rode up to 14. He stood in the room and looked at the city lights through the window and thought, this is what it feels like to be moving toward something. The Kiloquils were, in fact, extraordinary. This was established within the first 3 minutes of their arrival at the small restaurant on 18th Street. When Maya took one bite and closed her eyes for a moment in the specific way that meant, yes, this is the thing. Cole took a bite and understood immediately why her father had strong opinions. They sat across from each other in the small booth by the window, and it was different and the same. Different because she was not behind the bar. Different because it was 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, and the city outside the window was alive and bright and not midnight. Same because Maya was herself completely, with the same direct honesty and the same quality of attention, and the same way of asking the right question at the right moment. She had dressed in a way that was simple and exactly right. Dark jeans, a burgundy sweater. She wore small gold earrings that she hadn't worn behind the bar. He noticed this and said nothing about it, and noticed that he noticed it. They talked for 3 hours. About her parents. About Pilsen and what it meant to her. About the proposal she had written, and what it felt like to put the ideas on paper and see them become something formal and real. About the Northwestern thing. She talked about it more openly than she had at the bar. Maybe because she was on her own ground now. Maybe because something had shifted between them to a place where certain things could be said. She said, I don't regret it. I would make the same choice again. But I would also be lying if I said it didn't cost me. What did it cost you? Cole said. She thought about it. Time, she said, and the particular kind of confidence that comes from being in a room where people take you seriously. I had to rebuild that on my own. It takes longer that way. Cole nodded. He thought about the confidence he had built in his own early years. How much of it had come from rooms where people took him seriously because a venture capitalist or a professor or a journalist had said, this person is worth watching. How much of that he had taken for granted. He said, the committee makes their decision next week. She nodded. She didn't ask him anything about the process. She was not performing indifference. She genuinely had separated the fellowship from this, the same way he had. It existed in a different category. Whatever happened, she said, I'm glad I wrote it. Whatever happens, he said, you should keep writing. She looked at him. You say things like that, she said, like you're very sure of them. I'm very sure of this one, he said. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she picked up her coffee and something in the air settled into a different register. Warmer, quieter, the way air feels after a long exhale. He told her about his marriage. He hadn't planned to. They had been talking about the cost of choices, and he found himself talking about Claire, the 7-year marriage, the two people who had been good together in theory and increasingly wrong together in practice, the particular slow grief of marriage that didn't fail dramatically but just thinned gradually until one day there was nothing left to thin. He said it without self-pity and without revision. He said, we wanted different versions of the future, and we waited too long to admit it. Maya listened. She said, did you love her? Yes, he said. The way you love someone you build a life with. Not the way. He stopped. Not the way what? She didn't ask, but she heard the unfinished sentence. She said, I was with someone for 3 years. He was kind and consistent, and he said I was too much. Cole looked at her. Not in those words, she said. In the accumulation of small moments where he needed me to want less, be less, take up less space in my own life. She said it evenly. Old news, already metabolized. I don't blame him. He just didn't know what to do with someone like me. Cole thought about the bar at midnight, about the FDA database and the behavioral economics book, and the proposal that the committee's expert had called the clearest articulation of the regulatory gap problem she had seen from a non-institutional researcher, about the way Maya occupied a room. Not loudly, not with performance, but with completeness that made the room feel more real. He thought about the specific kind of person who would ask someone like that to take up less space. He said he didn't know what he had. She looked at him. Most people don't, she said simply. The afternoon was going gold outside the window. The 18th Street strip was busy. Families, Music from a car at the light. A woman selling flowers from a cart. Chicago doing its thing. Maya's Chicago. She said, "What happens after this week?" Cole had thought about this. He said, "I have to go back to San Francisco. I have a board meeting Thursday. And then I would very much like to come back here," he said, "if you want me to." She looked at him steadily. "That's a lot of flights," she said. "I have a plane," he said. It came out more simply than he meant it to, just a statement of fact. And then they both heard how it sounded, and she made a face that was trying not to be a smile, and he made a face that was trying not to be embarrassed, and then they both laughed. Actually laughed together at the simple absurdity of the distance between their circumstances that still somehow, entirely, did not feel like a barrier. "I have a plane," she repeated, imitating his tone. "I know how that sounded." "It sounded honest," she said. "Which is your best quality?" He looked at her. She looked at him. The afternoon light moved through the window and lay across the table between them, and the kiloquils were gone, and the coffee was cold, and neither of them moved to leave. He said, "Maya—" "Cole," she said. "I don't know what this is yet," he said, "but I know it's something I haven't felt before, and I'm not built for pretending things aren't what they are." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Neither am I—" "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. Outside, a horn honked. The flower seller pushed her cart to the next corner. The afternoon light shifted and deepened and held. Thursday morning the board meeting happened, and Cole was sharp and present and got 3 things done that had been stalled for months. Patricia told David afterward that she didn't know what happened in Chicago, but she wanted it bottled. David said he'd noticed too. Gerald, on the video call, said Cole seemed good. Cole was good. He texted her from the board meeting, which he had not done since his 20s, and which felt both absurd and completely right. Just, "How are the kiloquils this morning?" She replied 4 hours later, after her shift change. "Not as good as yesterday. Too much cheese." He sent back, "Unacceptable." She sent back a photograph of a plate of kiloquils with a circle drawn around the cheese, with a caption that said, "Exhibit A." He looked at the photograph in the back of a car, going over the Bay Bridge, and felt, again, the warm, sure thing. They texted. Not constantly. Neither of them was a constant texting kind. But daily. The kind of texts that were small windows into lives being lived. Something she'd read that made her think about something he'd said. Something he'd seen in a meeting that illustrated a point she'd made about the acquisition. A question she had about a healthcare policy paper. A photograph he sent to the Bay at 6 a.m. Fog low, water gold. He called her on Sunday. He had not been a phone call person since his 20s either. He called her, and she answered in a voice that was lower and warmer than her bar voice, and they talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing, and when they hung up, he stood in the kitchen for a moment just being still in the good quiet. The following Wednesday, the fellowship committee issued its decision. Maya Santos was awarded a 2-year Harrington Foundation Research Fellowship, full funding, housing stipend, access to the Foundation's research partners and laboratory infrastructure. Starting date, 60 days from notification. Patricia brought Cole the document. He read it. He set it down. He said, "The committee's decision was independent?" "Completely," Patricia said. "I have the scoring sheets if you want to see them." She ranked first in the research quality category by a significant margin, second in overall criteria by 1 point. Cole nodded. "Congratulations would be appropriate," Patricia said carefully, "if you know her." Cole said, "Patricia?" "Yes, I know her." Patricia nodded. She turned to leave. At the door she stopped. "For what it's worth," she said, and her voice had a particular quality it carried when she was saying something outside her professional role. "The opening of the TEDx, the part about the most brilliant person making $800 a week, I've thought about it every day since I heard it." She paused. "I'm glad," she applied. She left. Cole sat alone in the 52nd floor office with the bay going blue and wide beyond the window. He thought about what it meant, not sentimentally, but structurally. Maya would be a fellow at his foundation. She would be working in the healthcare equity space. She would be doing the things she was built to do, with the resources it deserved. All of this was happening because she had been brilliant enough to write a proposal that a committee of experts had ranked first in research quality by a significant margin. He had not given her anything. She had earned everything. He needed her to know that he knew the difference. He called her. She answered. "I heard," she said. Her voice was careful. Not cold, just careful. "I know you heard," he said. "I need you to know something. Cole, let me say it. I haven't looked at any part of your application. I haven't been in any part of the committee process. I have the scoring sheets, if you want them. You rank first in research quality. That's not me. That's 3 independent experts who have no reason to know who you are to me." She was quiet. "Maya, I know," she said. "Do you?" A pause. "I wrote something true," she said quietly. "I know what I wrote. I knew it was good." Another pause. "But I also know that if I hadn't met you in that bar, I never would have written it down." "That's different," he said. "Is it?" "Yes. I didn't write it. I didn't submit it. I didn't score it. I told you to write it because it was worth writing, the same way you told me my speech was worth giving, because it was worth giving. We did that for each other. The work is still ours." The line was quiet. Then she said, "My dad cried." Cole felt something move through his chest. "He went out to the garden," she said. "He was out there for a long time." "Like when you got into Northwestern," Cole said. A pause. "Yeah," she said softly. "Yeah, like that." Cole was quiet. "He wants to meet you," she said. Cole absorbed this. "Does he know who I am?" "He knows you're the reason I wrote it down," she said. And then quietly, before to respond, "I told him you were a friend." Cole sat with the word. "Friend." He said, "Is that what I am?" A long pause. The bay outside his window went fully dark. The city lights came up. The bridge glittered. "No," Maya said, "but I didn't know what else to tell him." Cole said nothing. He let it sit. She said, "I start in 60 days. "I know. The Foundation's research offices are in—" She checked something. "They're in San Francisco." Cole said, "I know." A pause. Cole, "Maya, this is terrifying," she said. "Yes," he said. I've never," she stopped. She started again. "You're not. This is not a category I've been in before." "Me either," he said, and he meant it completely. "But I think that's exactly the point." She laughed. Small, short, the real one, not the polished bar laugh, the unguarded kitchen at midnight one. He heard it, and it moved through him like warmth through cold hands. 60 days, she said. 60 days, he said. Those 60 days were the kind that changed the shape of time. Cole went to Chicago 4 more times. Twice for the Killiquile's place. Once for a Sunday morning where Roberto Santos, in the garden among his tomatoes and peppers, shook Cole's hand with the grip of a retired electrician, and then looked at him for a long moment with dark eyes that were very much like Maya's and said, "You seem like someone who's been looking for something." Cole said, "I think I found it." Roberto said nothing. He went back to his tomatoes. Carmen Santos, from the kitchen window, watched this exchange and smiled. The 4th time Cole went to Chicago, he didn't have a plan. He just went. He landed at O'Hare on a Thursday evening and texted her, and she met him outside the hotel in a gray winter coat, and they walked along the Riverwalk for 2 hours in the cold and talked, and at some point, without either of them deciding to, they were walking with their hands intertwined, and neither of them mentioned it, and neither of them let go. He walked her to the L stop. She stood at the top of the stairs. She looked at him. He looked at her. He said, "Maya." She said, "Don't make a speech." He said, "It's just one sentence." She waited. He said, "I love you." The Chicago cold moved between them. The L rumbled somewhere below. The city spread out behind her, the skyline catching the lights. Maya Santos looked at Cole Harrington with those steady dark eyes for a long moment. She said, "I know." He laughed. She said, "I love you too. I've known for a while." She paused. "I was waiting for you to say it first, because you needed to say it first." He looked at her. "Why?" "Because you've been not saying it for a long time. Because you needed to say the true thing out loud, just like the speech." She tilted her head slightly. "That's who you are. You know the truth before you say it. But you have to say it before you can live it. Cole stood on the Chicago Riverwalk in the cold and thought about how this woman, who he had met 11 weeks ago, who he had known over a bar at midnight, who had told him the truth on the first night, and every night after, who had seen him before she knew what he was worth, who had built her own path through the debris of circumstances she hadn't chosen, who read Nobel Prize economics in FDA databases, and wrote healthcare proposals that experts called exceptional, and who loved her father's garden and her mother's refrigerator drawings, and her brother who wore his diabetes like armor. He thought about how she was looking at him right now like he was just a man, not $4.7 billion, not Forbes, not the TEDx opening that 4 million people had watched, just a man who had been looking for something. He thought, she's right. She's always right. That is exactly who I am. He said, stay. She said, I'm taking the L. He said, I know. I meant, he stopped. He smiled. I meant stay. In general. She looked at him. She knew what he meant. She let him know she knew by the expression on her face, the one she couldn't quite contain, the unguarded one, the real one. She said, I'll be in San Francisco in 43 days. He said, 43 days. She squeezed his hand once. She turned and went down the stairs. He watched her until she disappeared around the corner. He stood alone on the Riverwalk with the city around him and the cold in his lungs and something in his chest that was the opposite of the stone, light, wide, warm, like a window that had been closed for a very long time and had finally been opened. He stood there for a long time. Then he went back to the hotel, and he slept the way you sleep when you're not running from anything. The fellowship started on a Tuesday. Maya arrived in San Francisco on a Monday evening, in a cab from the airport, with 2 large suitcases and a carry-on that held her laptop and the behavioral economics book, and a container of Carmen's tamales that were wrapped in aluminum foil and had survived the flight in remarkable condition. She had found an apartment in the Mission District. 2 bedrooms, 3rd floor, a window that faced west and caught the afternoon light. She had found herself and signed the lease herself and paid the deposit herself from savings that had grown carefully over 2 years at the Meridian. Cole had not offered to help. He had understood without being told that she needed to arrive in this new version of her life on her own terms, under her own power. He had understood because she was Maya and he had been paying attention. He met her for dinner that Monday night, not at his apartment, at a restaurant on Valencia Street in the Mission, 3 blocks from her new apartment that made good margaritas and better tacos and was the kind of place where nobody would look twice at them. She walked in and looked around and sat across from him and said, I'm here. He said, I know. San Francisco is cold, she said. Wait until June, he said. It gets worse. She made a face. He laughed. She laughed. The waiter arrived, and they ordered, and the restaurant moved around them with its noise and warmth, and nobody looked at Cole Harrington and his $4.7 billion, and nobody looked at Maya Santos and her 2 large suitcases and the tamales and carry-on, and they were just 2 people across a table in the Mission District on a Monday night, starting something. The next 7 months were not without difficulty. Let's be honest about that, because the ones who have lived it know. The first year of loving someone who is not from your world is not a montage. It's a negotiation. It's the dinner with Gerald from the board where Gerald says something offhand about the service industry, and Maya's expression does the thing it does. The 3-second journey from surprise to controlled composure. And Cole catches it and says something sharp, and Gerald backtracks, and on the way home in the car, Cole asks if she's all right, and she says she's fine, and they both know fine means. I will not let that man diminish me, but I'm also aware that I am in a world where that man exists, and there will be more Geralds, and I will handle them, but I'm allowed to be tired. He said, you don't have to handle anything alone. She said, yes, I do. That's who I am. He said, that's who you've had to be. She was quiet. He said, you can let me be part of the handling. That's not weakness. That's what this is. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, okay. Not easily. Not as a resolution. Just, okay, I'll try. She tried. There were adjustments. The apartment in the Mission and the apartment in Pacific Heights were 15 minutes apart, and Cole spent 3 nights a week at his and 4 hers, which he preferred because her apartment had a west-facing window, and smelled like good coffee, and was full of books that were stacked on every available surface in a way that the designer, who had chosen every element of his kitchen, would have found unconscionable, and that he found every time he walked in, like coming home. She went to Pilsen for Danny's birthday in April. Cole went with her. Danny Santos was 24 and healthy and quick and funny, and shook Cole's hand with the grip of someone who had decided he was like the man, but wanted him to know the terms were conditional. Roberto made a dinner that went on for 4 hours. Carmen asked Cole about his childhood with the attentive warmth of a woman who had been listening to people for 31 years. At some point in the evening, sitting at a kitchen table with the remains of dinner and Roberto's specific chili and Carmen's stories and Danny's jokes, Cole looked across the table at Maya, and she was laughing at something her brother had said, and the gold kitchen light was in her hair, and she caught his eye, and the look she gave him was, he had never been given a look quite like it. It was a look that meant, you are here, in my world, at my table, and I can't believe how right that is. He gave her the look back. Roberto, who missed nothing, watched this and went back to his chili. The proposal went to the FDA. Not just a proposal, a full research submission, built on Maya's original framework, developed over 7 months at the foundation with 3 collaborating researchers. Cole had read no part of it until Maya sent it to him the night before submission, because she wanted him to read it not as a foundation officer, but as a man who had first told her to write it down. He read it at midnight, at the desk in the Mission District Apartment, with a west-facing window. While she slept, he read all 43 pages. He made no marks. He had no notes. He just read. At the end, he sat for a long time. Then he got up and he went to the bedroom doorway, and he looked at her sleeping, dark hair across the pillow, one hand open near her face. And he thought about a bar at midnight. A midnight 8 months ago that had started with a man who didn't know how to say what he meant and a woman who told him the truth. He thought all of this came from that, from being willing to say the true thing. He went back to the desk. He wrote her one sentence on a sticky note and put it on top of the printed proposal. Your mother should see this. In the morning, she found it. She read it. She stood in the kitchen in her robe with the proposal in one hand and the sticky note in the other, and she cried. Just briefly, just completely, in the way you cry when something you have worked for in the dark for years finally exists in the light. Cole made the coffee. He gave her the cup. She wiped her eyes. She said, "Don't make a big deal." He said, "Okay." They drank their coffee. Outside, San Francisco was beginning. The fog was low, the way it always was, and the light was coming in gold through the west-facing window, and the books were stacked on every surface, and the tamale container from Danny's birthday was still on the counter, because neither of them had thrown it away. It was a Tuesday. Somewhere in Chicago, Roberto Santos was probably already in his garden. Somewhere in Pilsen, Carmen Santos was probably putting drawings on her refrigerator. Somewhere in Dayton, in a storage unit he paid for and never visited, there was a shoebox full of notes that said, "Eat the apple. It doesn't keep, and your math test is Wednesday." Cole looked at Maya across the kitchen table. Maya looked at Cole. Outside the window, the fog began to burn off the way it does in San Francisco, slowly, gradually, the world becoming clearer as the morning advanced, the light winning the way light always does, not dramatically but permanently, the darkness retreating not all at once but finally,